Now, if you're a fan of Strictly, then you might have seen the news this week that Judge Rob Rinder, who was a former contestant on the show, had been out to Poland where he successfully managed to track down his dancing partner's Ukrainian grandmother and aunt who'd fled from the fighting. Rob's joined us in the studio now. First of all, Rob, it sounds like the most fascinating, emotional trip.
It was, but I have to correct you. I didn't go out on some mercy mission. It was just a privilege and gift because I was working there to tell the story of the people who were trying to cross the border from Ukraine into Poland, actually for a sister radio station. And I speak a bit of Russian quite a lot. I really wanted to kind of get an idea of what that journey involved. And of course, have kept in contact with Oksana, so reached out to her to find out what the situation was before we were going, and then discovered that her grandparents and her uncle and aunt were stuck trying to cross into Ukraine, from Ukraine into Poland. And their story took on board, if you like, another complexion of the story while I was there. And so it was a real privilege, a real gift to be able to assist them, and whilst assisting them, to use their story to tell the world about what's really happening there.
And tell us, what was it like on the border? Because I kind of can only, it's such a long border as well, at different crossing
Right.
points, different areas. It's hard to understand it if you haven't seen it.
Right. It's really kind of important that we locate it in the modern world. And by the modern world, I mean the first world. If you stand in Przemyśl train station, you're looking at a first world station that could be Glasgow or London coming into Euston on the Pendolino line. It has all of the outward trappings, all of the feelings of somewhere that you would know in your own life. The road that leaves into Medica from Ukraine into Poland and the other way around up till a month ago was not just a first world road, it looked like a motorway from London to Milton Keynes. And that's enormously important as we sort of sit here perhaps now and kind of reflect on all of the outward trappings that we take for granted that kind of cushion us in a sense of security and complacency about our own liberal democracy because everything looks desperately like it's modern. And that's what the border of Poland and Ukraine looked like up to 4 weeks ago. Now, when you stand in Przemyśl railway station, what you have are trains that arrive infrequently from Kiev into that town, which are full cheek to jowl with women and children pressed against one another, babies in mothers' arms. As they come into the station, they're shepherded by young Polish volunteers, many of them wearing fluorescent tops to identify that they're there to help people as they're processed into the Red Cross centres or into a great big place that up to a week ago was a large Tesco's and now is full of NGOs, many of them British, doing their best to help people. It is a cacophony of noise and cries and is what happens when the first world disappears into depravity. True on the border as well, where you see as people have walked across that border 2 kilometers, Ukraine into Poland, you see tables and desks and organizations there to assist people. And in the middle of all of that horror and noise and cacophony, there is so much human good, especially, I have to say, the number of British organizations that we saw there. You know, be they on the border, the Sikh community giving out food, or just individual acts of heroism. We saw the head of the Scottish Police Federation drive there just to be on the border to assist people. Ambulance drivers on their days off come to deliver nappies to people who needed them and give out sweets when they'd run out of things to give out. Story after story of human decency and of that kind of Dunkirk spirit of Britain really wanting to respond to the call to assist people. And of course, that's also reflected in the overwhelming response up and down the country across every community of people who have said, look, I've got a spare room, I'm happy to help. The problem is and was, as we stood at Przemyśl station and met refugees, and again, You know, the idea of refugee has been bound up with complex things nowadays. It's hard to think of a more articulate expression of what that is than women and children, many of whom I spoke to, especially the ones from the East who I could understand. And we spoke either in sort of Ukrainian or Russian. They would say they want to be near the border if possible, but they've left their brothers, they've left their husbands, they've left their sons in many cases, and they had no idea that Britain had acted in this way. They had no idea of the tens, no, no, hundreds of thousands of promises made by families to give them room. The problem was that if they wanted to take up that promise, they couldn't, because in that big centre that, as I say, was a week ago at Tesco's, there were national flags with people assisting there on a voluntary basis of Denmark and Germany and France, just to help people do the basic administrative things that you need in order to get here. There was no British flag. And so what that meant was they just were simply unaware, or even if they wanted to claim the promise, the hospitality of those ready, willing, and able to assist, it was extremely difficult indeed. You could get a 2-hour trip on a free bus to Rzeszów, or you could go, if you didn't know, as I might do, on the free bus to Krakow, where there's an honorary consulate there. The problem with that honorary consulate, Ruth, is that it's shut because of COVID.
Well, look, thank you for telling us about both the good and the bureaucratic bad that you saw when you were there.